I'm honored to be here today and speak with you. I'm also impressed with what I understand to be one of the key engineering college objectives, which is to create and mold top-notch engineering students, but at the same time have these students be men and women of faith who will make an impact in the companies where they serve and the communities where they serve. This reminds me of the story of a Pakistani holy man. He died and went to heaven, but when he got there, the heavenly guard wouldn't let him in. He was sitting there and a bus driver arrived at the pearly gates. Well, if you know anything about Pakistani bus drivers, you know that they are utterly terrible and dangerous drivers. So while he was, the heavenly guard checked the list and he said to the bus driver, "Congratulations, you're on the list. Welcome to heaven. Come on in." Well, when the holy man heard this, he jumped up and started complaining. And he said, "How can you let a bus driver into heaven and not me, a holy man?" And the guard explained, he said, "Well, here in heaven we judge on results. While you were preaching, everybody was sleeping. But while he was driving, everybody was praying." In today's world, companies want results. And based on my career experience, it's not enough just to be a technically superior engineer or technically competent in your chosen profession. One must also be a person of strong work ethics, great leadership skills, and committed to personal and company values. In short, a well-rounded individual that can make an impact for his or her employer. I'm going to let Dean Parkinson and all of your professors turn you into great engineers. And today I'm going to focus on a few character traits and abilities that I think can add to your engineering talents and give you the keys for success that you might need in your career. I don't claim to have all the answers, but I've carefully observed what has helped me in my career. And I'd like to elaborate on 6 points today that I think might help you as well. First, have perspective. I define perspective as the ability to view things in their true relative importance. My wife and I like to go mountain biking. The first time we went mountain biking in Moab, my friend said, "Now when you fall off your bike," and I interrupted him, I said, "How do you know I'm going to fall off my bike?" And he said, "Trust me, you will fall off your bike." Well, on the second day, I had my first crash, and it was an epic crash. I was riding down a relatively easy slope, but I was going about as fast as I could go. As I headed down the steep trail, I noticed over to my right a big rock, and I seemed to be drifting off the trail. I focused on the rock and told myself, "Don't hit that rock." But as much as I tried to avoid it, I seemed drawn towards that. Before I knew it, I ran smack into the middle of that rock. I flew 18 feet over the handlebars and landed on my head. We actually measured the distance. I learned 2 things from this experience. First, I was going way too fast for the conditions. We often feel pressure to move too quickly when we're making decisions. Remember, you will always make a better decision with more information than less information. So make sure you do all you can to ask questions, view the problems from different vantage points, and discern true relative importance. Usually, it's not as necessary as we think to move quickly when making an important decision. The second thing that I learned from this experience was that by focusing on the rock and not where I wanted to go, I had pretty much assured that I would hit the rock. My friend explained that when you go into a turn, you have to focus on the exit of the turn, especially tight turns, and not focus on the obstacles, the stumps or rocks in your way. So if you do that, you and your bike will exit and make the turn naturally. Conversely, if you only focus straight ahead, then most likely you will continue to move in a straight line and fly right off the trail. By focusing on the difficulties and problems in our lives and in our careers, I think we lose perspective and we make poor decisions. One piece of final advice on discerning true relative importance is to ask yourself, what is the worst thing that can happen in this situation? Most people don't have this perspective, and they don't really want to think about this. I am by nature an optimist. I think anything is possible. But by thinking about the worst possible outcomes, I have improved my perspective and improved my ability to make decisions. You will be surprised that seemingly on a regular basis, the worst possible outcome does indeed occur. In fact, sometimes worse than you imagined. So this is a great way to be prepared for those situations. Second, develop excellent interpersonal skills. The Chinese have a saying, 先做朋友,后做生意, which means first we need to make friends, then we can do business together. I found that these words of wisdom are true in almost all cultures. We must learn to get along with everybody, including difficult people, or I might say especially difficult people. In my opinion, getting along with people is a must-have skill to be a leader. When you're first hired, you will likely go into a company and you'll be hired for your technical skills. So you will be doing a specific job, and probably 100% of your time will be spent on technical endeavors. However, if you look forward in your career, 1 or 2 years, 3 to 5 years down the road, when the company needs a factory manager or a product supervisor, then they will look at your ability to convey the company vision, to motivate people, to resolve interpersonal conflicts between employees. And if you don't have that skill and you can only do your technical job, you'll likely be passed over for the promotion. On the other hand, if you have the critical leadership skill of getting along well with other people, you'll probably be promoted. Then you will find that maybe only 50 or 60% of your time is spent on technical things, and the rest of your time is spent working with people. After a few more years, you might be promoted again. Now you're in charge of a large project or a whole division of engineers. Now you're going to find that only 10 or 20% of your time is working with technical things, and the majority of your time will be spent working with other people. Basically, the higher you rise in an organization, the higher the proportion of your time will be spent working with people and not things. If you cannot successfully work with others, you will not be an effective leader. It's just that simple. Early in my career, I was hired as vice president in a Chinese joint venture. As the only American in a company of about 1,000 Chinese employees, I was under a lot of pressure to get along with people and to make a contribution. Shortly after I arrived, I was fortunate enough to negotiate a tax settlement with the Chinese government where we saved the company several $million. The Chinese president called me into his office and he said, "Mike, we're very pleased with your work. We really like you because," I thought he was going to say, "because you just negotiated this great tax settlement." But what he said surprised me. He said, "We all like you because you eat lunch with the employees in the workers' cafeteria." That was very interesting. He said no other foreigner has ever done that. Of course, I think my financial work was important, but the fact that I was getting along well with all the workers was more important to the president. In his mind, negotiating favorable tax settlements was something that any vice president could do. But eating employee food in China in the late 1980s, now that was a real accomplishment. Later, when I became president of the company, I focused on 4 priorities: our customers, our employees, our suppliers, and our shareholders. You'll notice that I didn't mention the computer systems, the factories, the operations, engineering, finance, and accounting, all of which are very important. But at the end of the day, people are the most important thing in your career. So never burn bridges, see the good in everybody, and get along with even the most difficult people. We all know that each of us are spiritual brothers and sisters, so in my mind, that makes it easier for us to genuinely care for our co-workers and our colleagues and get along well with them. Third, live with integrity. You might be surprised how easy it is in your work for honesty to be compromised. And it usually starts out as just a small compromise. But if you are not honest before long, you will find dishonesty becomes a bad habit to which you are enslaved. Many years ago, I hired a chief financial officer, and he almost immediately gave me cause for concern. I could tell that he was cheating on his expense reports. So I called him in and I said, look, you're the CFO, you're in charge of finances. You need to be setting a better example here. Well, he didn't change. And after a couple of months, I had to let him go. He was hired by another company, and he went to that company and ended up embezzling several $100,000. He was thrown in jail and now is in a Hong Kong prison. It was very ironic because this is somebody who really considered himself a good employee, and he was very talented, but he ended up in jail. Why? Because he compromised his integrity. William Bradford said, "In righteousness there is great simplicity. In every case that confronts us in life," and I would add in the workplace as well, "there is either a right way or a wrong way to proceed. If we choose the right way, we are sustained in our actions by the principles of righteousness, in which there is power from the heavens. If we choose the wrong way and we act on that choice, there is no such heavenly promise, and we are destined to fail." I can tell you that living with integrity is the most important thing that you will do in your career. People will want to work with you, they'll want to work for you, they'll want to be your partner, they'll want to fund your projects because they know that you are honest. Never compromise your integrity. Now, some people think that we only need to be honest in big things, and we don't need to worry so much about small things. But I think that probably small things are even more important. A good example of this is in a legal court case. If a judge discovers that a person told one small lie in the courtroom, he will doubt everything that that person has said. Likewise, in the great trial of life, we need to be truthful in small things. One temptation is exaggeration, which is sometimes fun, but really it's a form of being untruthful. Don't say, "We have 6 or 8 bids for this project," when really we only have 1 or 2. Well, really only 1. I remember I ran a 100-kilometer race over several mountain peaks, and I finished in 24 hours and 52 minutes. It was so hard to add the 52 minutes because 24 hours sounds so much more impressive. I found that if you can have relationships based on trust, then people will really want to do business with you and want to work with you. Simple statements like, "Oh, I'll give you a call," can destroy trust if you don't follow through. The person will tell his friend, "Don't believe him. He always says he's going to call, but he never does." You will never regret being completely honest. You want people to say of you, when she says something, she means it, and she'll follow through. In my career, I've also planned exactly what I might say in difficult situations. When you have a prepared, detailed response, you are more likely to maintain your integrity. One of my favorite lines that I've used in Asia very often is, "Mr. Tanaka or Mr. Chun, I love you, but I don't love you enough to spend 10 years in prison with you." This allows me to add a bit of humor to a tense situation, but at the same time convey very clearly that I won't compromise my integrity. We're now experiencing what some refer to as the Mormon moment. Expect people to notice what you're doing and hold you to a higher standard. Recently, a friend who is not of our faith told me, I always expect Mormons will be 3 notches above everybody else. He was talking about integrity. I was also surprised just a few days ago when a friend from the East Coast called me. He's Jewish, and I've never actually met him in person, but we correspond on the phone a lot. He started the phone call with, "Hello, Brother Mike, how are you doing today?" Well, obviously he had read somewhere that Mormons call each other brother and sister, and he was going to call me Brother Mike. I'm happy that I've always been very honest in my business dealings with this person, and I would guess that his entire judgment of the church is based on his relationship with me. The same will be true in many of your careers. Just last summer, I arranged for a couple of internships in Taiwan for BYU engineering students. I explained to these students that these companies had never heard of BYU, and their entire judgment of BYU would be based on their performance in the company alone and nothing else. Well, I'm happy to report that just last night I got an email from that company, and they want to have 2 more internships from BYU engineering students this year as well. So the students did a fantastic job representing BYU. Fourth, clarify expectations. One of the most important things that I learned at this university was from Professor Bill Dyer, who has since passed away, but said, all interpersonal conflicts, including conflicts in the workplace, are due to violated expectations. I could talk all day about this powerful concept, but basically, in order to not violate expectations, we must clarify expectations. This means letting others know exactly what you expect of them and discovering and understanding exactly what people expect of you, especially as an employee in your new workplace. Now, for example, let's say in your first job, you're asked to write a report. Now, after writing hundreds of reports here at BYU, you say to yourself, well, if there's one thing I know how to do, it's how to write a report. So you go home, you write a 10-page report, and you hand your masterpiece to your boss. And your boss says, what is this? Do you think I have time to read a book? I just wanted a 1-page summary on the 3 critical product fixes. Well, your boss expected a short report and he got a long one, so his expectations are violated and he's very unhappy. You're probably even more unhappy because you've spent 3 days and 3 nights writing your report, and you expected your boss to be very pleased with this, but he's unhappy, and so you've had violated expectations as well. You probably are thinking to yourself, why didn't you just tell me what you expected in the first place? Well, this is a key point. Most people are not very good about clarifying their expectations, even though they certainly have expectations. So it's up to you to get them to articulate what they want by asking appropriate questions. So before you write your report, you ask, how long would you like this report to be? Should it be 1 page or 10 pages? What should the content be? If I wrote it according to this outline, would that be what you're looking for? Thus, you're able to clarify expectations and ensure you have no interpersonal conflicts. If you fail to clarify expectations, then expectations most likely will be violated, either yours or others or both, which always leads to interpersonal conflicts and disappointments, none of which is good for our careers. When I was first made head of Asian operations, I was quite surprised to discover our US CEO thought China was a very easy place to travel and do business. He expected that we should be having a lot more success in such an easy place. Well, the next time he came to China, I decided that I needed to clarify expectations. I found out that in his previous trips, he had always driven around in a big air-conditioned Mercedes and been sheltered from most of our problems. So I took him on a train from Hong Kong to Shenzhen. It was in the middle of the summer, about 90 degrees. We arrived in Shenzhen. We carried our luggage across the border, like I always did. We got into a hot, sweaty dirty taxi with no air conditioning. We drove to a customer, and the customer sat there and told our CEO what a lousy job he was doing for about 1 hour. You can believe from then on, our CEO never thought China was an easy place to do business. In fact, he always asked me, how do you get anything done over there? Well, taking your CEO and making him carry his own luggage in 90-degree heat and humidity may not be the best career move. So I caution you there. But after that trip, our CEO's opinion of what could be done in China was certainly more clear. Along these lines, let me tell you just a little secret. Most people promise more than they can deliver, and they end up delivering less. So when you fall short, what are you doing? You're violating expectations. So people are going to be disappointed. But if you do the opposite, if you set expectations lower and then you exceed expectations, people are going to be pleased. Let's say, for example, we have an engineer and he promises us that he's going to produce 10 new product designs this year. Well, at the end of the year, he only produces 9. So we're disappointed. On the other hand, you now know this concept. In the same situation, you promise that you're going to do 7 new product designs. And at the end of the year, you produce the same number, 9 new product designs. What do we all say? What a great engineer. He produced 2 more designs than we expected. Let's promote that guy. Well, the 5th point I'd like to make is to be Yobanfa. In Chinese, Yobanfa means there is a way, and by extension, never giving up until you find that way. It means making things happen and being proactive. It means being willing to pay the price and do hard things. It means being creative, working harder than anybody else to find a way to get the job done. Every successful person that I know is Yobanfa. Ask yourself, what should I do? Too many people do a lot of talking and not enough doing. If you are a person of action, then you will stand out in your company. Just last week, my wife and I went to London to visit a friend who is now 83 years old. He has collected art for about 40 years and is now selling his collection for an estimated $125 million. And he's going to give all the money to charity. I asked him how he made his fortune, and I discovered that he was a real Yobanfa person, somebody that would not give up. In the late 60s and early 70s, he was dealing with a company that he felt had good potential. They had solid financial statements, and he wanted to help this company issue commercial paper which he could sell to pension funds to help the company expand. The problem was that the pension funds would only accept AAA, AA, or single A ratings for securities. And the 2 rating agencies, Moody's and Standard & Poor's, refused to give this company an A rating. They said they hadn't been around long enough. Well, other people had given up, but my friend was Yobanfa and decided there must be a way. He asked, are there any other rating agencies the pension funds will accept? Shockingly, a simple question that nobody had asked before. It turned out there was another agency, Fitch, a UK company. So he went to Fitch, and with a great deal of work and persuasion, he convinced Fitch to give this company an A rating. He was able to help this company with their expansion plans, which turned out to be very profitable for him as well. By the way, the name of this company was Walmart. The 6th and final point, keep your priorities in line and be focused on your purpose. Constantly ask yourself 2 key questions. What is most important here? And what am I trying to accomplish? Many people rarely or never ask these questions and therefore drift through school, through their careers, and through life itself. With any activity you embark on, ask, what is my purpose? For example, when you design something or write a program, ask what's the end objective. When you go to a meeting, ask everybody, what's the purpose of this meeting? What are we trying to accomplish? Amazingly, often you will discover that nobody really knows, or they have different opinions. When you make a phone call to a colleague or a customer, ask yourself, what's the purpose of this call? Personally, I like to write down what I'm trying to accomplish on a little piece of paper when I make a phone call or when I go to a meeting. If I am purpose-driven, I will see the big picture and stay focused. Otherwise, I will not accomplish important things. Therefore, in summary, keeping our priorities in line means identifying what is most important and then being laser focused on that purpose. It boils down basically to how we spend our precious time. So once you identify your purpose, you should constantly ask yourself, will this activity that I'm doing right now help me accomplish my purpose? If not, then we should probably do something else with our time. I remember explaining this concept to a student one time, and he said, well, I guess spending 4 hours playing video games each night is not going to help me with my objective to get good grades in school, right? I said, right. In closing, let me just share a story from my own life about the benefits and blessings of having our priorities in line. We had a company in China that was losing a significant amount of money, and the board expected me to solve this problem. My job involved nearly 12,000 employees in about 40 wholly owned and joint venture companies. At the same time, I had a church position that required a significant time commitment. I had spent a great deal of time, effort, and expense trying to figure out how this company could stop losing money, including hiring consultants from our Japanese company and our US company. I received 2 consulting reports, one of which was more than an inch thick, but the experts basically concluded, we don't know how to solve this problem. Except it took about 100 pages to say that. Well, the Sunday before our chairman was scheduled to arrive from New York, I was occupied with important family and church responsibilities. I had already spent a lot of time preparing a presentation for our chairman, but I knew it didn't offer a good solution. I felt a great deal of pressure to work on this presentation on that Sunday. However, I decided to spend the time fulfilling my family and church duties. I awoke early on Monday morning. I still had no idea what to present. As I reviewed the material, suddenly I knew the answers to our problems. I knew the solution. It was almost 8 o'clock, so I walked right into the meeting. I didn't have time to prepare a PowerPoint, and I explained to the chairman what the solution was to this problem. He literally stood up out of his chair, slapped his hand on the desk, and said, I have been coming here for 5 years, and this is the first time I've heard anything that makes any sense at all. We were able to bring that company into profitability and a few years later successfully sell it. Now I want each of you to know that those ideas did not come from me. In fact, the experts could not come up with a solution, so it's doubtful that I could have come up with one. But I'm convinced that I was inspired with the answers because I had first done all I could do myself, then was true to my value of putting priority to my family and church on Sunday. I'm a firm believer that there's great power in doing the right thing. When we do our part, then heaven can help us in our careers and in our lives. In conclusion, live with integrity, keep your priorities straight, and be fixed on your purpose. Then set goals for yourself and be yobanfa about accomplishing those goals. I can promise you, if you do this, you will have great careers and you will have happy and successful lives as well. Thank you very much.